Chapter 3, Philip. I heard him before I saw him. It was the day after that game, and I was in the back room of the wine shop counting canaries. A shipment had just arrived, and it was important that there were exactly 24 of the little tweeters, because that's how many I was donating to the kids in the obesity clinic over at Children's Hospital. It was the annual drive, and local merchants were asked to contribute to the department of their choice. And since one of our children has a propensity for being overweight, I am particularly sensitive to the plight of those boys and girls in the midst of that heartbreaking battle. So, I planned on sending them a check as well as those canaries to hopefully cheer them up. Counting birds of any kind is a challenge, but canaries are more active and tend to flit about the crates they're shipped in more so than others. So it requires total focus as you transfer them into individual boxes, at the same time making sure that none of them have watery eyes, puffed bellies, or any other telltale signs of disease. One bird concerned me, a multicolored Spanish timbrado that appeared to be too thin and nowhere as lively as the others. I picked the little fellow up and held him to my ear. The Spanish timbrado belongs to a species commonly referred to as song canaries for their unique chattering sounds and metallic tones. But when this bird opened his little mouth, I heard nothing, either because it was unable to sing or because his chirps were drowned out by the outbursts coming from the front of the store. Are you fucking kidding me? I left Hyo, a 16-year-old Korean American who worked for me after school and on weekends, to mind the register and assist customers. And while Hyo, who was saving up to buy a car when he got his driver's license the following year, was an affable lad capable of handling even the most difficult pet buyers, what came next turned my head. Please don't yell, sir. It scares the animals, said Hyo. And I wouldn't be yelling if these fucking animals weren't here and you sold what your sign says you're selling. Or is wine shop the way you say pet shop in China or Japan or whatever rice gobbling country you swam here from? Well, I couldn't place it at first. That voice was familiar. I knew I'd heard it recently. And when I stepped into the doorway that separated the back room from the front of the store to see what the commotion was about, I recognized the belligerent customer as the belligerent parent who dressed me down the day before at the soccer field. Once again, his rage was palpable. Red-faced, heaving chest, eyes bulging like a sick Yorkshire canary. So, I opted to remain calm and try to diffuse things without incident. There's a liquor store about a mile from here. Would you like me to call and see if they're still open? He turned in my direction and immediately remembered me. Yo, this is your place. It is, I nodded. Makes perfect sense. What does? That the same idiot who can't see that a player is not offside also can't see why this is a ridiculous store. You can't see anything, can you? I guess not, I answered, shaking my head, pretty much like Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder. Hyo, who'd been silent up to this point, chose this moment to speak up. It's a pretty racist remark, he said, looking at me with a combination of surprise and disappointment. I know it is. I was just quoting what he said to me yesterday. I knew you'd never say such a thing, said Hyo, visibly relieved. It's not racist, damn it. I only mention them because there are no famous blind white people. Shouted you know who. Oh, really? I countered. How about Helen Keller and Galileo and Joseph Pulitzer, who created the Pulitzer Prize? Or Brian McKeever, the Olympic cross-country skier? Or Louis Braille, the man who invented Braille? Would you like me to continue? Are you out of your fucking mind? Your blind white people couldn't shine my blind black people's shoes. My gosh, look at the joy Ray Charles's and Stevie Wonder's music have brought to millions of people. These are great men who just so happen to be blind, not like your guys who made a fucking business out of it. The only reason Braille invented Braille was so he could read because other people got tired of telling him what he was missing. And what the hell did Helen Keller do except be blind? And she's on a stamp. Why would they put a person who couldn't even find the post office on a stamp? She was also deaf and mute, I told him, which means that even if she did find the post office, she couldn't tell the clerk she wanted to buy her own stamps or hear how much they cost. What bullshit. I was going to respond, was going to explain that overcoming her handicaps was a laudable achievement itself and an inspiration to so many others similarly afflicted. But before I had a chance, the silence was broken by a faint chirp from the sickly Spanish timbrado I'd been holding since I came in from the back room. So I looked down and started to gently stroke its head. "What the hell is that?" he asked. "A canary," I answered. "We're donating 24 of them to Children's Hospital," Hyo added, "as incentives for the boys and girls in the obesity program." "That's very nice," he said. It caught me off guard. Those were the first humane words he'd uttered in the 2 days he'd been a new, unwanted entry into my life. "That's very, very nice," he continued. Perhaps this is a real person, I wondered. Maybe this is who the guy really is, and the maniac I'd been dealing with was merely him acting out other frustrations in his life. Understandable. Repulsive, but understandable. I'm wired to instinctively give people the benefit of the doubt, to focus on their inherent good. My wife Daisy has always claimed that was what attracted her to me, my desire to stress the positive. So I decided that I'd focus on the man who stood before me now and start anew. "Yes," I said with a smile, "they'll get them as rewards for reaching certain goal weights." "That's wonderful," he said, nodding. "But if they don't reach their goal weights, how much you want to bet that those fat turds eat those fucking canaries?" As I reached for the broken pole from my birdcage stand, I kept behind the counter to fend off dangerous intruders. Flashes of my own child's weight struggle, the tears, the object of name-calling, and the Saturday nights spent in a bedroom, uninvited to parties. I prayed I'd get in one good swing before he was out the door. Chapter 4, Jeffrey. It was totally self-defense. I know how it might look in hindsight, but as the saying goes, hindsight is in the eye of the beholder. And at that moment, what I was beholding was an asshole, a large asshole, holding a broken pole from a bird's cage stand, which can be a lethal weapon in a threatening manner. I had no way of knowing what this asshole was going to do, but I had reason to believe that he was mentally unstable because Exhibit A, he calls his store the wine shop, and he's selling fucking parakeets in there, him and his little Jap sidekick calling me a racist because I can't off the top of my head name 17 famous blind white people. And for the record, how famous is a cross-country skier? Even if he is famous, which I doubt, I bet he has people skiing behind him yelling, "Turn left, turn right," or else he's gonna ski into a fucking tree. So while I admire his determination, no way is he in the same blindness league as Ray Charles and Stevie Wonder, who never had anybody standing behind them at the keyboard shouting, "Move your hand to the left a little, make an F sharp," or whatever. But my point is, this fucking unstable lunatic is coming at me in a threatening manner with a Louisville slugger, and in that situation, legally, and bear in mind that I have spent many hours in a court of law, you have the right to defend yourself by whatever means necessary. So I grabbed the first thing I saw, which it turned out was a cage. My plan was to hold it between me and the lunatic while I backed out the door. You should have seen his face when I picked up the cage. Jesus. His face turned the color of Hawaiian punch, and his eyeballs got the size of fried eggs, and he's waving his broken pole from a birdcage stand and yelling, "Put down that lemur!" I'll be honest, at the time I didn't know what a lemur was. Later I found out from Wikipedia that they were the little furry animals with the big eyes in Madagascar, which I have on DVD. But at the time, all I knew was I was not going to put down the cage and have nothing between me and the lunatic with the broken pole from a birdcage stand. So I backed up, got the door open, and took off running. Fortunately, I parked close by, and I was in the car and got the doors locked before the lunatic reached me. He was waving the broken pole from a birdcage stand and screaming, and all I wanted to do was get out of there. So I started the car, threw it into gear, and stomped on the gas. Maybe I brushed him a little going past, but as I said earlier, this was clearly a self-defense situation. Looking back, maybe I should have dropped the cage before I got into the car, but everything was happening so fast. Plus, if I dropped the cage, it might have injured the lemur, which I later found out was endangered. So, the argument could be made from an ecology standpoint that I actually rescued this valuable animal, which the unstable lunatic had placed in a potentially hazardous situation, vis-a-vis he was swinging a broken pole from a birdcage stand in its vicinity. I'm not saying that is my main legal position. My main legal position is that I was totally within my rights to defend myself. As you can imagine, by this point I was pretty upset, so I drove straight home. I have to say, as a person who just almost got his skull crushed, I was disappointed in Donna's reaction. "A lemur?" she asked. She said, "I asked you to bring home wine, and you bring home a lemur?" "It was self-defense," I said. "Can we keep it?" said Taylor. "No, we cannot keep it," said Donna, who gets excited. She's Italian. "I have 17 women coming here in a half hour to discuss Freedom by Jonathan Franzen, and they will be expecting to drink wine. So your father is going to take the lemur back to wherever he got it from and bring home some wine like I asked him to, or he is going to spend the rest of his life sleeping in the garage." "Mom, you're scaring the lemur," said Taylor. "I can't take it back," I said. "Yay," said Taylor. "Why not?" said Donna. "Because the guy it belongs to tried to kill me," I said. "And why would he do that?" said Donna. "Well, partly because I took his lemur." Donna rubbed her face with her hands, starting high and then pulling down, so her mouth got all stretched out. It's not an attractive look for her, but I have learned over the years not to point this out. "All right," she said. "Taylor, you will put the lemur in the basement." "Yay," said Taylor. "For now. Tomorrow, your father will get rid of the lemur." "But, Mom..." "Your father will get rid of the lemur, and I do not care how he does it, but right now he will go get some wine. He will get a lot of wine." Which is what I did. There's no point arguing with Donna when she's being that Italian. I thought about mentioning to her that the lemur owner was the same asshole who called the offside, but I decided it was probably better if she didn't know that. Figured she was never going to find out because I had no intention of ever coming into contact with that lunatic again. Chapter 5, Philip. I loved that lemur more than I loved my father-in-law. I tried my best not to get emotionally involved with the animals in my pet shop. Through the years, I've learned that it will only lead to heartbreak due to the inevitability that sooner or later they will leave the store, either by way of a sale or, as in the case of that sickly Spanish timbrado that I accidentally dropped and crushed with my heel when I grabbed the broken pole from a birdcage and took off after the racist maniac. Feet first. So try as I may to maintain a purely professional relationship with all that crawl. A side note. It's a weird sentence. I've learned that it will only lead to heartbreak due to the inevitability that sooner or later they will leave the store, either by way of a sale or feet first. What does that mean? Anyway. So try as I may to maintain a purely professional relationship with all that crawl, hop, fly, lope, slither, or swim, and regard them as mere inventory, there was something about that lemur that made me break my own rule. Why? Because it was endangered? Well, yes and no. Of course, my heart goes out to any species that borders on extinction. I feel that way about polar bears, giant pandas, sunset frogs, Bengal tigers, Hawaiian monk seals, Egyptian vultures, Serpent Island centipedes, and Malagasy giant jumping rats. But since I've never forged a personal relationship with any of them, I regret their impending demise, but lose little or no sleep over it. With that baby lemur, however, from the moment it came into the wine shop, I felt an immediate connection. Perhaps it was his size, just 2.1 ounces, or the fact that its thumbs were only pseudo-opposable, which made its hands less than perfect at grasping objects, that I felt the desire to care for it, feed it, nurse it. It was delivered about an hour before closing on a Saturday evening, and because of its special needs, I was reluctant to leave it unattended until the store reopened Monday morning. So I took it home, brought it downstairs to our finished basement, put it in a corner next to a heat lamp, and hand-fed it dry leaves, which I left in a bowl next to the cage for his next feeding. Daisy's folks were in town, and I found her note saying that she, her mom, and the kids had gone to a movie, and that my father-in-law, who had opted not to join them, was napping in the downstairs spare bedroom in the finished basement, about 15 feet away from the lemur. Wanting to take full advantage of the quiet, I went upstairs to the family room to watch a game I'd TiVoed, Wheel of Fortune. When, not 10 minutes later, the smell of something burning was followed by the sound of our smoke detector, which was followed by the sound of my father-in-law's incessant pounding of his fists on the door to the downstairs bedroom that he had accidentally locked himself in. Apparently, I put the heat lamp too close to the dry leaves, so when I got down to the basement, I grabbed the cage and brought the frightened lemur up to the safety of our kitchen and cuddled it before grabbing the small fire extinguisher we kept inside the pantry. Went back downstairs to the now smoke-filled basement, put the fire out, heard the sounds of my father-in-law's somewhat softer pounding on the spare bedroom door, went back upstairs, grabbed the spare key we kept inside a kitchen drawer, went back downstairs, opened the door to the spare bedroom, and carried my unconscious father-in-law up the stairs and outside for fresh air, where he was revived by oxygen-toting firemen who had pulled up just as I was laying him down on our front lawn. And now this very same lemur had been stolen, kidnapped, endangered in the hands of someone oblivious to, or even worse, uncaring about its delicacy. So I told the policeman that I knew who the perpetrator was, and that I wanted him arrested and punished to the fullest extent of the law. I said a law and not the law because I really didn't care which law it was, just as long as its punishment was cruel and unusual. I told him this in the emergency room at Children's Hospital, where Hyo had driven me after that lunatic's car knocked me down and ran over my ankle as he sped away. "What's his name?" asked the humorless policeman, whose nameplate identified him as Officer H. Pepper from the local Fort Lee precinct. "I have no idea," I answered. "But you just told me you know who this guy is." "I do, but I don't know his name. All I can tell you is that he's number 14's father." "Excuse me?" asked Officer Pepper, who was now looking at me with the same expression traditionally seen on the faces of people who are talking to idiots. What could that possibly mean? "His daughter plays in the AYSO league that I'm a referee in, so all you have to do is get your hands on the roster for the Princess Daffodils in the 10 and under division, see which player is number 14, then arrest her father and prosecute the bastard to the fullest extent of the law, any law." "No," said Officer Pepper, who is now looking at me with the same expression traditionally seen on the faces of people who want to beat the daylights out of another person. "How it works is you get a hold of the roster, see who number 14 is, then call me with the information, and then I'll go deal with her father, okay?" Before handing me his card, which I quickly glanced at to see and happened to notice his rank. "You're a sergeant?" I asked. "Yes." "You're Sergeant Pepper?" "Don't start, okay?" "You must get a lot of teasing." I said, "Don't start, okay?" "Fine." So while the good folks at Children's Hospital taped my chest in deference to 2 crack ribs and fitted my left ankle with a soft walking cast, Hyo went online and found the Princess Daffodils roster on the AYSO website. The player who wore number 14 was Taylor Peckerman. Her parents were Donna and Jeffrey Peckerman, and because the listed address was only about a half-mile away from ours, I felt compelled to drive past their house on my way home. Chapter 6, Jeffrey. There is an old legal principle, which I forgot the technical Latin name of, but it comes from English common law, and the gist of it is if you go to a man's house, he can legally kill you. And when we say a man's home, we can legally interpret that to include the man's property, meaning his yard, his sidewalk, and you will later see why this is important, his swale. A man's swale is his castle, especially if he mows it and fertilizes it, which I do. My swale would not be out of place at Augusta National. So, here's what happened. I was upstairs lying on my bed watching SportsCenter. Parentheses, this is off topic, but has there been an NBA highlight in the past 17 years where a player scored a basket and didn't travel? I mean, since these are professional basketball players getting paid millions of dollars, shouldn't they have to dribble the fucking basketball once in a while? Whereas in your modern NBA, a guy could be nowhere near the basket. He's basically still in the locker room. And suddenly he runs to the basket, carrying the ball like it's a ham sandwich, and after 300 steps, he dunks it. And instead of getting whistled for traveling, he gets on SportsCenter. And before you think what I think you're going to think, I'm saying they all do this, including the white guys. Close parentheses. Suddenly, I heard this shout from Taylor's room. Buddy, no! Taylor named the lemur Buddy. She thinks it's a male, even though there's no way to tell by looking at it. I did not give her permission to keep Buddy because Donna would kill us both. I mean, me and Buddy. But I did say Taylor could have Buddy in her room until the next day when I would figure out how to get rid of him. Donna, after Category 5 whining from Taylor, had agreed that okay, Buddy could stay one night in Taylor's room, but Taylor was to keep him up there and not let him get anywhere near the Oprah Book and Wine Club. So I jumped off the bed and hustled down to Taylor's room where she was freaking out in the direction of her canopy. Back when Taylor was in her princess phase, which she really, really wanted more than anything in the whole world, was for her bed to have a canopy. It cost $450, and 10 minutes after we got it, Taylor was done with the princess phase and on to the next phase, which I think was Hannah Montana. But she still has a canopy, and Buddy had climbed up on it for the purpose of taking a dump. Turns out that lemurs in their native environment are tree dwellers. They like to have some altitude when they relieve themselves. So Buddy was perched up there, dropping long, droopy squirts of lemur shit onto Taylor's bedspread, which is currently a Justin Bieber model. Why did you let it out of the cage? I asked Taylor. 'Cause he wanted out, she said. He wanted out so he could go to the bathroom. Well, I didn't know that. She said this with that voice that women develop at a very early age. The one that whatever happens, the cable goes out, they have a headache, a lemur shitting on the bed. It's your fault. I went to grab Buddy, but here's the thing. A lemur is basically a monkey. It has like 10 million years of experience with not being captured. So I'm lunging around Taylor's room trying to grab this thing, but it's skidding around like a big hairy mosquito, up on the light fixture, down on the floor, up on the bureau, back up on the canopy, and every time I go to grab it, it's gone. One mistake I made, and this is something you should bear in mind if you ever find yourself in this situation, you should close the door. I realized this when Buddy skittered into the hall and headed for the stairs. I was right behind him, but I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Randy Moss or some equally fast white guy. You're not going to catch a fucking lemur. Here was the situation downstairs, as it was later explained to me by Donna, after she had calmed down a little and stopped talking about removing my balls with a corkscrew. The women were no longer discussing Freedom by Jonathan Franzen. It turned out that of the 17 of them, exactly one, Jeanette Keebler, actually read the entire book, and she wasn't sure what it was about. So after several minutes, the ladies had dropped literature and switched over to the topic of breast enhancement. At some point, this became a general discussion of the human body, and at some further point, diabetes came up. And Denise Rodecker, who had had several, maybe 4 glasses of wine, decided she would show everybody her insulin pump. It's a little gadget that looks kind of like a beeper, which pumps insulin into a person, in this case, Denise Rodecker. She unhooked it from herself, and as it happened, was showing it to the freedom discussion group at the exact moment when Buddy skittered down the stairs. Here's another fact about lemurs. They are very curious. When they see something interesting, they want to check it out. Don't ask me why, but of all the things in the living room at that particular moment, including a wide range of hors d'oeuvres, the thing that was most interesting to Buddy was Denise's insulin pump. It was like a magic trick. Denise is holding her pump up in front of everybody, and then there's this blur, and bam, Denise is holding nothing, and there's Buddy up on the window fixture with the pump in those little hands he has, studying it like it's a crown jewel. At that point, a lot of things were happening at once. Denise was screaming, and some of the other women were screaming, and Taylor was crying, and Donna was yelling at me to, easy for her to say, get the insulin pump back from Buddy. I knew I couldn't catch him barehanded, so I was looking for something to trap him with, and I grabbed the first thing I saw, which was this carved wood mask Donna got when our cruise ship stopped in Jamaica that depicts the face of an African-American male with the words Yaman on his forehead. So I'm holding this mask, moving toward Buddy on the window fixture, and I would have had him, except that at that exact moment, Jeanette Keebler, who has never been a rocket scientist, decides to escape and opens the front door. Buddy sees the opening and leaps off the window like a little furry Batman, still holding the pump, and skitters out the door. Denise is now screaming so loud my teeth ache. I'm after Buddy, holding the mask, pushing through the women. By the time I get outside, Buddy is standing in the middle of the lawn looking at me. He still has the pump. I slow down and start creeping forward, saying, "Good boy, Buddy, good boy, there's a good boy," in a calm tone. He's watching me getting closer, not moving, like he's sincerely considering what I'm saying. And I'm thinking another 2 steps and I'll have the little shitter. Just then, out of the corner of my eye, I see this Prius come gliding up the street. I take another step forward, and I'm slowly raising the Yaman mask into attack position, when suddenly this Prius swerves up onto my swale, and the window goes down, and this voice, which I immediately recognize, yells, "Get away from that lemur!" An asshole like that, you know he drives a Prius. "Get the fuck off my swale," I yelled. "That lemur is my property and you stole it," he yelled. I was going to point out that it was self-defense, but suddenly Buddy took off running toward the Prius, still holding Denise's insulin pump. I took off after him, but before I got there, he jumped through the window into the car. The asshole threw the Prius into gear, and I was yelling at him to stop, but he stomped on the accelerator. The car swerved sideways, and I felt this pain in my hip. And the next thing I knew, I was lying on my back with dirt landing on me as this lunatic Prius asshole wrecked my swale peeling out of there. I rolled over and got up on my knees, and I have to say in all modesty that for a guy who had just been legally assaulted by a vehicle and was not in a proper throwing stance, I got a lot of mustard onto the Yaman mask. It went through the window clean, and I know I heard a yelp. By now, the Prius was back on the street, tires squealing. Donna and Taylor were out of the house now, running toward me. I was still on my knees watching the Prius. Just as it turned the corner under the streetlight, a shape jumped out the driver's side window. "Buddy!" yelled Taylor. The little shitter ran straight to her. He wasn't holding the pump. Chapter 7, Philip. When I arrived home, Daisy was waiting in the driveway with something less than the greeting I needed, considering all that had happened. There wasn't a "Hi, honey, how was your day?" or an "Oh my gosh, why are your ribs deep and your foot in a cast?" And nothing that even resembled the much referred, "I just read that the American Medical Association says the best cure for cracked ribs and a sprained left ankle is a sympathetic wife who cooks her husband his favorite meal, SpaghettiOs, and afterward dims the lights in his den while he leans back in his favorite chair, closes his eyes, and listens to the very best of Michael Bolton." Instead, what I got was a growl about how we were going to be late for the recital if we didn't hurry. Both of our children were supposed to dance that night. Heidi, 16, was a star. lithe, heavenly grace, poetry, and fluid motion. Every season, Miss Graham's the owner of Dancing for Fun. The studio where the kids took lessons featured Heidi in as many numbers as possible. But our 8-year-old, despite boundless enthusiasm, had a slight weight problem, was a dreadful dancer and the target of ruthless snickering. As a result, these recitals were always an odd duality for us because on one hand, we were there to accept praise and congratulations for Heidi, while on the other hand, we were there to support and very possibly defend our son Trace, the only boy ballerina in the 26-year history of Dancing for Fun. And though I was still furious that the lemur had somehow wriggled free and jumped from my car, I found some comfort in knowing exactly where it was, and that all it would take was a simple call to Sergeant Pepper in the morning and justice would be served. So I opened the door to the Prius, 43 miles per gallon. Daisy got in and we drove to the recital. "What's the theme this year?" I asked her. These programs usually had a motif that loosely connected all the individual numbers. "Music from the movies," Daisy answered. "That could be good." "Heidi has a big solo during The Way We Were." "That's wonderful," I said. We drove in silence for a minute or so, knowing that there was another question to be asked, but we both needed a little time to brace ourselves. Finally, I took the plunge. "And Trace?" "Trace also has a solo," she told me. "During the theme to The Godfather." "Hey, that's great," I shouted, figuring The Godfather was one of the most masculine movies ever made, and that, well, maybe it would sort of, change a thing or two. "Well, yes and no," Daisy answered. "Which means what?" "He's going to play Sonny Corleone tap dancing through the toll booth and getting mowed down by Barzini's gunmen." "And that would be the yes part," I surmised. "That's right." "And the no part?" "The gunman will be doing pirouettes while lobbing pink carnation bullets at him." Those were the last sounds uttered by either of us for the rest of that drive. Perhaps now would be a good time to say a few words about a woman in our community who will soon play a part in this story, an alcoholic named Denise Rodecker. When her husband was still alive, she was a thin, very attractive, very sensual-looking blonde. Think Kathleen Turner in Body Heat, for whom most of the men harbored a secret crush, but generally speaking, the wives in Fort Lee were not jealous of this object of their husbands' nocturnal secretions, as they knew about Denise's unwavering devotion to Jerry and the solidity of their marriage. But then things took an unforeseen turn during what became known in the tri-state area as the Blizzard of '06, when Jerry, a do-it-yourself type with a tendency to overexert himself, suffered a heart attack while buying a new snow shovel and died 2 days later. After that, Denise started to drink, packed on about 60 pounds. Think Shelley Winters in the Poseidon Adventure. Contracted diabetes, attributable to that weight gain, and began hitting on those same husbands who were no longer attracted to her. She became a conversation piece around town whom I hadn't seen until the night of that recital. Daisy and I found seats in the third row of the Martin Luther King Jr. Junior High School auditorium. We like sitting close to the stage to provide visual support should our kids glance in our direction during their performances. These evenings always ran in age order, starting with the youngest kids and ending with the oldest. This was bad news for me and Daisy. Whereas most parents could discreetly leave after watching their child dance, this year we did not have that luxury and would have to sit through these 6 performances before Trace's, and then 15 more until it was Heidi's turn. If Trace played Little League like most boys his age, we could be at a movie right now, then grab a bite to eat, return some calls, take a nap, and still get here in time to see Heidi, I whispered to Daisy. Then the lights went down, the recital began, and we sat through everything, ranging from triumphant 4-year-olds dancing up steps to Rocky, to drenched 6-year-olds dancing in water to Titanic, to frightened 7-year-olds dancing away from Nazis and Schindler's List, and now it was Trace's turn. a slightly overweight Sonny Corleone in a silver suit, tapping his way through the cardboard toll booth, the emergence of at least a dozen twirling mobsters pelting him with a fusillade of colorful petals, and him crying out as he staggers against its force. Enter Denise Rodecker, probably through a backstage door and then onto the set to the astonishment of everyone. "I've watched this film maybe 50 times, said the guy on the other side of me, and never noticed the fat blonde lady in this scene before. She too was staggering, reeling in fact. As I found out later from the bottle of red wine she polished off at a book club meeting at that idiot Peckerman's house. But she knew that the glucose from that Merlot would eventually metabolize and she'd need another infusion. So while my slightly overweight son had finally succumbed to the torrent of flowers and was now writhing on the stage in spastic memories of movement, Denise Rodecker pointed directly at me in the third row, reached inside her coat, pulled out the lemur by its endangered tail, and began swinging it overhead as she shouted at the top of her lungs, "Hey, dickweed, if you want to see this monkey alive again, give me back my fucking insulin pump," before throwing the now dazed lemur straight up into the air, catching it over her shoulder like Willie Mays did in the 1954 World Series against the Cleveland Indians, stepping over my slightly overweight son and exiting into the New Jersey night through the backstage door. Chapter 8, Jeffrey. I hate dance, ballet, tap, that modern shit where they all look like crack addicts. I hate it all. I'm not saying dance is gay. It is gay, but that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's boring. I had to watch a live ballet once when Donna dragged me because her cousin's daughter was in it, and it was the most boring thing I ever sat through, except the time I went to a NASCAR race and there was not one fucking crash. So it was definitely not my plan to drive to a dance recital. When the lunatic asshole Horkman drove away from my house, I had no plan to follow him anywhere. I was planning to go back into my house, pour myself a drink, and get on the phone, because that lunatic asshole had just nearly run me over in front of witnesses on my own swale. This kind of situation is exactly why the good Lord created Jewish litigation attorneys named Cohen, of whom I personally know 4. I also know from experience as an expert forensic plumbing witness in courts of law that pain and suffering can be very difficult to disprove. Even without visible injuries, I could very well be suffering from chronic Prius-related neck and back ailments that could cost me potentially millions of dollars in missed income, not to mention loss of consortium with my wife. It crossed my mind as I watched the asshole's taillights disappear that I could be on the road to boat ownership. So that was 1 point for me. Point 2, I still had Buddy. I didn't want Buddy, but the lunatic obviously did, a lot, so that was in my favor as leverage. Plus, I was pretty sure I nailed the lunatic with the Yaman mask. 3 points for me versus Bupkis for the asshole. Unless you count that he got the Yaman mask, which I hated anyway, but not because it was African American. So I was feeling pretty good as I got back onto my feet. That feeling lasted maybe 11 seconds, which is how long it took for Denise Rodecker, who is the size of a fire rescue truck but louder, to wobble across the lawn to me, screaming about her insulin pump. "Denise," I said, "calm down." This was a mistake. Telling a batshit crazy woman to calm down only makes her more batshit crazy. "Don't tell me to calm down," she said. "Fine," I said, "don't calm down." This was also a mistake. Fortunately, Donna had arrived and was attempting to hug Denise, and even though she could only get her arms about halfway around, Denise finally stopped screaming. So she was still blubbering about her pump. She'd had a lot of wine. "Jeffrey will get your pump back, won't you, Jeffrey?" Donna said, giving me a look that said unless I got the pump back, the only consortium I was ever going to have again would be with my right hand. "Okay," I said, "I know where the guy works. I'll call the police, and tomorrow they can—" "No!" said Denise, back in batshit mode. "I need it right now." "But I don't know where the guy lives." "Well, I do," said Denise. "You do?" Donna and I both said. "I saw him," said Denise. "It's Philip Horkman. He owns a pet store." "I thought he was a nice man. Why did he take my insulin pump? I think he was actually after the lemur, I said, nodding toward Buddy, who was sitting on Taylor's head. That thing is his, said Denise. I said it was, which, looking back, was another mistake. For a drunk woman the size of a tool shed, Denise showed excellent quickness. She snatched Buddy off Taylor's head and started toward her car. Donna yelled at me to stop her, and I tried, but Denise threw a stiff arm that caught me right in the throat, and I went down again. I heard Oprah lady screaming and Taylor crying, then I heard tires squealing, then Donna was in my face, grabbing my shirt, pulling me up. Jeffrey, she shouted, you have to stop her. She yanked me to my feet and started shoving me toward my car. Hurry, she's gonna kill herself. She might hurt Buddy, said Taylor. I stumbled to my car, started the engine, put it in gear. Then a thought occurred to me. I put it back in park and lowered the window. What? Says Donna. Where the fuck am I going? Don't use that language in front of Taylor. You ever notice this? You make a valid, logical point, and women try to change the subject. Well, where am I going? I said. After Denise. And where is Denise going? I said. That stopped her. She held a quick conference with the other book club women, and they agreed Denise was probably going to find this Philip Horkman. One of the women said he lived in Fox Hollow Estates, which figures because it is a development completely filled with Prius-driving assholes. Somebody pulled out an iPhone and Googled his address. I put the car in gear and took off. 10 minutes later, I turned into the asshole street and slammed on my brakes hard, just in time to avoid getting hit by Denise Rodecker's Range Rover, going the other way at about 280 miles an hour. Just ahead, I saw a lady in a driveway shouting at Denise to slow down. I pulled over and lowered my window, and this lady, who turned out to be Horkman's neighbor, told me Denise had made a big scene honking her horn, yelling for Horkman to come out. So I went out there, the lady told me, and I told her the Horkmans aren't home. She was very rude. I think she's been drinking. She has a monkey. It's actually a lemur, I said. Do you know where she's going? Well, the Horkmans are at a dance recital at Martin Luther King Jr. You told her that? I did. Was that a mistake? Should I call the police? I'll take care of it, I said, putting the car in gear. At that point, if there was one thing I was sure of, it was this. If the police arrested Denise Rodecker for driving drunk with a stolen lemur, in the eyes of my wife, for that matter, in the eyes of the entire Oprah Book Club Vagina Brigade, it would be my fault. 5 minutes later, I'm pulling into the Martin Luther King Jr. Junior High parking lot. I see Denise's Range Rover parked at a bad angle halfway up on the curb. The door's open. The engine's running. Denise is not inside. I pull up behind the Range Rover and get out. I'm standing there trying to decide what to do. What I should have done, looking back, is take the key out of Denise's car, but I didn't. Suddenly, bang! A door on the side of the school slams open. Here's who comes out in order. 1, Denise, holding Buddy by his tail like he's a fur handbag. 2, the asshole, who I'm happy to see is limping, yelling at Denise. 3, a woman who has to be the asshole's wife because she is yelling at him. 4, a fat kid wearing some kind of douchebaggy silver suit who's crying. And right away I know this is the asshole's kid because A, he looks like him, and B, he's a douchebag. The asshole sees me and he stops short. What are you doing here? He says. What are you doing here? I say, which I admit was not a good comeback, but I didn't have anything prepared. He says, I'm here to watch my son's dance recital. I look at his son and say, what's he supposed to be? Elton John is a refrigerator. What's that supposed to mean, says the wife. He's Sonny Corleone, says the asshole. He's who? It's interpretive, says the asshole. Oh, yeah, I say. I can definitely see the Corleone family following Sonny here into battle. Come on, fellows. We have to go to the mattresses. Only I'm lisping, so it comes out felloth and mattresses. This really pisses off the asshole's wife. She's in my face, yelling, just who the hell do you think? Then we hear a slamming sound, which is Denise shutting the door of her Range Rover. The asshole hustles over and pounds on the window. She lowers it, but only half an inch. Denise, he says, trying to sound calm, which he is not, give me the lemur. Give me my insulin pump, she says. I don't have your insulin pump. It occurs to me that the asshole doesn't know that Buddy left it in his Prius. I'm about to point this out, but before I can say anything, Denise holds Buddy up by his tail and screams, "Then your fucking lemur is going off the George fucking Washington Bridge." She stomps the ass and fishtails out of the parking lot. "Stop!" the asshole screams. "That is an endangered animal." He's gimping as fast as he can toward his Prius. I head for my car and get in just as the Prius leaves the parking lot. I put the pedal to the floor and I'm right behind the asshole me, weaving through traffic, trying to catch up with Denise, who's driving like a maniac. My cell rings. It's Donna. "What?" I say. "Did you find Denise?" she says. "Yes." Up ahead, Denise is getting on I-95. "So she's okay? She got her pump?" Not yet. Denise is weaving across 4 lanes. The asshole is staying as close as he can, but he's having trouble keeping up in the Prius, which is basically the same motor as a food processor. "What do you mean, not yet?" says Donna. "Is there a problem?" "Listen, this is a bad time, okay? I'll call you right back." In the background, I can hear Taylor saying something to Donna. Up ahead, I see Denise's arm, which is the size of my leg, sticking out the Range Rover window. She has something in her hand. She's waving it around so the asshole can see it. It's Buddy. Donna says Taylor wants to know if Buddy is okay. "Tell her Buddy's fine," I say, and hang up. Chapter 9. Ouch. Ow. I have absolutely no complaints about my penis. While neither exceptionally long nor formidable in girth, it has performed all duties admirably. It's sired 2 children, has sexually satisfied a wife on those special occasions when we enjoy a romp in the hay for purposes other than procreation, and has regularly expelled liquid waste from my system without even once waking me up from a night's sleep to do so. Consequently, I've never been one of those guys with the need to compensate by driving either a souped-up or pimped-out car, hence my Prius. It gets me where I want to go, has an AM radio, and the fact that it's eco-friendly, 55 miles per gallon, is in the plus column as well. Is it built for a car chase? Probably not. However, that was never really a consideration, given it hadn't crossed my mind that one day I might be chasing a drunken diabetic motorist swinging an endangered primate out her window while driving at breakneck speed toward the toll booths of the George Washington Bridge. But that was exactly the situation I now find myself in, although I figured I'd caught a break when her Range Rover didn't go into the easy pass lane. As a result, my plan was a simple one. That is, when Denise Rodecker stopped to pay the toll, I would jump out of my car, run up to her car, reach inside, grab the lemur, run back to my car, get back into my car, make a huge sweeping U-turn into a westbound lane, then leisurely drive back to the peace and quiet of my home in Fox Hollow Estates. Even with my tape ribs and soft walking cast, I was confident I could easily pull this off. Innate quickness played a major role in my winning 4 varsity letters in fencing at Haverford College. Go Black Squirrels! And I had no doubt it would trump any of my current liabilities given the short distance between our cars. So, when her Range Rover slowed to a halt to become the second car before the booth, I reached down to shift the Prius into neutral and felt something lying on the console that I hadn't seen in the darkness, a rubber tube. I grasped it, pulled it toward me, and could feel that there was something weighted at the other end. From the glow of the lights above the toll booth, I then saw that the tube was attached to a contraption that could very well have been the insulin pump Denise Rodecker kept yammering about. How it had gotten into my car was beyond me, and I had no idea how the weird-looking wooden thing lying next to it had gotten there as well. I picked up the wooden thing and saw what looked like, it looked like some kind of mask of a native of a tropical environment with the words "Yeah, man" painted on his forehead. Out of sheer curiosity, I put the mask on my face and checked what I looked like in the rearview mirror, when suddenly I noticed that Denise Rodecker's car had moved up and she was now in fact being handed her change by the toll collector. So I grabbed the pump, opened the door to my Prius, and hobbled toward the Range Rover, yelling, "Hey, look what I have!" at the top of my lungs. But I wasn't fast enough to get her attention as she pulled away from the toll plaza and onto the bridge. So I immediately turned, paid no attention whatsoever to the toll collector, who screamed when she saw someone wearing a Yaman mask holding a strange-looking device with wires and tubes attached to it. Hobbled back to my car, got in, and purposely screeched through the toll without paying, as I didn't want to risk losing sight of the vehicle that was now carrying my precious lemur toward Manhattan. Did my Prius let me down? Not really. Look, it wasn't the car's fault that it ran out of gas about a third of the way across that bridge. Because the Prius was so incredibly fuel efficient, 68 miles per gallon, I had a tendency to be lax when it came to refilling, knowing that even if it did run out of gas, since it was a hybrid, the battery could still power it. No problem, except that the battery could only power it up to 34 miles per hour before the gas kicked in, which meant that if the car was out of gas, that was the fastest it could go, 34 miles per hour. Good news if you're driving on local streets trying to get to an Exxon station. Absolutely dreadful news if you're trying to get away from a veritable armada of police cars, fire engines, and EMS trucks that think you have a homemade bomb. But that's what happened. Although at first I had no idea the roadblock at the other end of the GW bridge was intended for me. All I knew was that as I saw the taillights of Denise Rodecker's speeding car exit onto Manhattan's Henry Hudson Parkway, I was so hell-bent on not losing her that I didn't even think that when the cops moved two of their cars to allow me passage to the off-ramp, it was because they were afraid we'd explode on impact. Yet, once I'd gotten onto the highway, I did become curious when I saw in my rearview mirror that the entire roadblock was now following me, and that when they got about 100 yards behind my Prius, they maintained that margin. When I slowed down a bit, they did the same, and when my acceleration topped out at a blazing 34 miles per hour, they sped up as well, thus being the slowest low-speed chase in NYPD history, although at the time I was still unaware that it was actually me they were low-speed chasing. It was only when that helicopter came overhead and shined that huge spotlight on my Prius did it occur that I may have been of specific interest to them, although I must say I was dumbfounded as to why they would waste all of this manpower on a motorist just because he didn't pay a measly $12 toll. So I signaled and pulled over onto the right shoulder, figuring that we could clear this thing up quickly so these heroic men in blue, who risk their lives on a daily basis protecting and defending, could turn their sights back to real criminals. I stopped, opened the car door, stepped out, waved at them, smiled, and shouted, "Okay, fellas, I'm guilty as charged. Do with me what you will." Whereupon they forced me to the ground and made sure I lay there face down by dint of a boot on the small of my back, before men in heavy bomb squad apparel went into my car, found what they were looking for, and had a special robot gingerly place it inside a special tub where they blew up Denise Rodecker's insulin pump. Chapter 10, Jeffrey. I don't know what this Horkman asshole did to piss off the cops, but he definitely got their attention. There was a whole cop army chasing him, including a helicopter, which is pretty funny because he was going like 6 miles an hour. They could have caught him on skateboards, but they were keeping their distance like he was America's most wanted terrorist mastermind instead of an asshole from Jersey in a Prius. I passed him when he slowed down on the GW bridge, so I was between him and Denise when she got onto the Henry Hudson Parkway. My plan was to stay with her because Donna would kill me if I lost her in her condition. Plus she had Buddy, who thank goodness she did not throw off the bridge. I was right behind Denise when I looked in my rearview and saw the asshole stopping and getting out with his hands up. Right away there were cops all over him, pushing him down on the ground and pointing guns at his head. I admit I smiled. I was still smiling when I ran into Denise's Range Rover. She stopped right in the middle of the Henry Hudson Parkway, and wham, there's an airbag in my face. After a few seconds of just sitting there and going, fuck, I got out of the car and I saw the whole front end was totally wrecked. Steam coming out, green glop dripping down on the road. I knew I wasn't driving home. I went to yell at Denise for stopping in the road, but when I opened her door, I saw her eyes were closed and her skin was the color of oatmeal. Buddy was sitting on her head, looking at me with an expression of, now what? My first thought was that Denise was dead, which meant I was in a world of shit with Donna. But then she made it sound like, and her eyes flickered a little bit, so she was alive. But she definitely needed a doctor. I started running back toward the cops. All of a sudden, I felt something, which turned out to be Buddy, jumping up on my shoulder. So I thought, okay, at least I got Buddy. Then I heard this explosion, bang, up ahead, and I thought, whoa, they shot the asshole. But when I got a little closer, I could see he was fine, still face down on the ground, but not shot. Looking back, I realized how it must have looked to the cops when they saw me. They're all tense. They have a guy on the ground they think is Osama bin whatever. And all of a sudden, another guy, who they also don't know, comes running toward them in the middle of the Henry Hudson Parkway, shouting and waving his arms, and he has what looks like a monkey on his shoulder. It could arouse suspicion, I can see that now. But at the time I didn't see it. When a bunch of cops started running toward me, holding guns and shouting, I couldn't hear them because of the helicopter. But I assume they were planning to render aid to me as a law-abiding civilian in a bind. Now, right here is where a lot of shit happened really fast, including some things that I did not realize at the time, but found out later. First, the cops reached me. They were still waving guns and yelling, but I still couldn't hear them. I saw one of them unclipping something shiny from his belt, which turned out was a taser. That's right, this hero was planning to taser a man armed with a fucking lemur. Speaking of whom, Buddy, despite having just gone through a traumatic experience in the form of being waved out of the window like a pennant by Denise, had retained his natural curiosity, not to mention quickness. So when the hero cop reached out toward me with his taser, Buddy snatched it. The hero went to snatch it back, but Buddy jumped off me and onto another cop. The hero tried to grab Buddy, and somehow, I don't know if Buddy did this on purpose or what, the taser went off right into the second cop's neck. He made a kind of whimpering sound, then fell sideways. While he was falling, his gun went off. This next part I still don't like to think about. What happened was the bullet went straight up, right through the metal floor of the helicopter. The good news was the metal slowed the bullet down enough so that it was no longer traveling at a lethal velocity. The bad news was it was still traveling fast enough to lodge itself in the scrotum of the helicopter pilot. I know that most helicopter pilots, and especially police helicopter pilots, are experienced professionals who spend many hours training for emergencies. But I don't care how much training you have, you can never really be prepared for having to fly a helicopter when you have just taken a bullet to the balls. Next thing I knew, the chopper was coming down fast, right where I was standing with the cops. We all took off running. I thought I was gonna die. The wind from the chopper nearly knocked me over. I jumped over a guardrail and kept running towards some trees on the side of the highway. I heard this really loud whoomp behind me, which was the helicopter making a rough landing. I stopped and turned around. It looked like a war zone. The chopper on the ground, rotors still turning, ambulances coming from somewhere. Sirens going, more cop cars coming with their sirens screaming, cops running all over the place shouting. Then I saw Buddy. He was skittering across the highway, a little blob of fur heading directly toward me. Next I saw Hortman. I guess when the chopper went down, the cops forgot about him because he was back on his feet, looking kind of dazed. While I was looking at him, he spotted Buddy. He yelled something, which I couldn't hear, and then he started running after Buddy, which meant he was running directly toward me. Cops were yelling at him, but I don't think he could hear them. Then, over all the racket, I heard popping sounds like firecrackers. I felt some splinters fly off a tree near where I was standing, more popping. Suddenly I realized what was happening. The fucking cops were shooting at me. Or maybe they were shooting at Horkman, or both of us, or even all three of us, if you count Buddy. I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I turned, sprinted up the embankment, jumped over the wall, and started looking for somewhere to hide in Manhattan. Chapter 11. Philip. Here was the sequence as I remember it. A cop stomped on my back, I farted, a helicopter dropped out of the sky. Causes and effects? Possibly. But while I'm certain the downward force of that heavy boot induced the sounding of the rectal trumpet from my unsuspecting sphincter, I honestly can't say whether the resultant wind breakage was strong enough to prompt the airborne whirlybird to spin like a broken dreidel that came this close to crash landing in the Hudson River. No matter what, the ensuing commotion made it possible for me to stagger to my feet and take off toward an embankment. First, because I saw the lemur running in that direction, and then because the cops started shooting real bullets at me, which, for all intents and purposes, reclassified me to be as endangered as the lemur. Perhaps even more so because I would bet money on this, the lemur can run a lot faster than a middle-class family man with a soft cast on his left ankle. So it quickly became apparent that I would have to implement Plan B as soon as I could figure out what it was. In fact, if you want to parse things, since none of this was considered beforehand, technically there was never a Plan A. So what I did was call out to that idiot Peckerman, who at this point was only a few steps ahead. I thought I'd appeal to whatever modicum of decency he might possess in that ill-fated soul of his, thinking that he'd momentarily put aside our squabble and lend me a hand. Literally. All I needed was for him to stop running, reach back with an outstretched hand that I could grab onto, and help me with my last few steps up the embankment. The whole effort would have taken maybe 5 seconds, and when we reached the top, if we still hated each other, we'd go our separate ways. But he didn't stop. Maybe he didn't hear my cries of, "Help me, Peckerman, please help me," over the sounds of all that gunfire. Or maybe he did hear my cries of, "Help me, Peckerman, please help me," and just ignored them because he's, you should pardon my language, a scoundrel. Either way, he just kept going. So I now had to figure out Plan C. Or maybe this was actually Plan B. Because the cops were getting closer, but I never had a chance to give the plan much thought, because after hobbling 2 more steps, my left ankle gave out, so I lost my balance, fell to the ground, and rolled back down the embankment. To this day, I truly believe it was because it was a moonless night, and I was wearing a black shirt that the cops didn't see me and kept advancing up the embankment as I rolled past them, about 40 feet away, down the embankment, over the curb, and back onto the Henry Hudson Parkway, until I finally came to a stop against the front tire of Denise Rodecker's Range Rover. I was just sitting there in the middle of the road, with her inside, semi-conscious, slumped over the steering wheel with what looked like strawberry Turkish taffy issuing from the corners of her mouth. So once again, I found myself staggering to my feet, got inside Denise's black Range Rover, pushed her immense body over onto the passenger seat, and slowly drove away before exiting at 79th Street, where I easily blended into the crosstown traffic. Where to go? Daunting question, as I knew it was just a matter of time until the cops caught up with me. Surely they'd run the plate number on my Prius and then distribute my name and picture. Maybe they'd done that already? So I dashed through any thoughts of leaving the city, because I'd watched enough episodes of Law and Order to know that when the police are on the lookout for people they believe brought down a police helicopter, the first thing they do is set up checkpoints at all tunnels and bridges. What to do? I became paranoid of every squad car I saw, and then of all cars in general, as I thought they might be undercover cops. I was getting more and more nervous. I needed a Plan D, I think, but couldn't think of anything. I was sweating. I needed help, but from where? I'm not a religious man, but divine intervention would have been nice. And then I heard it. The voice of God? Not exactly. It was more like the grinding of gears on a tractor trailer when it's slowing to a halt. It was the sound of Denise Rodecker staring back into consciousness. I once read somewhere, Reader's Digest I think, that great men overcome dire situations by making the cards they were dealt work for them. Well, on the seat next to me was a huge card. Denise was sick and in need of a doctor, badly. If one of the pets at the wine shop was in her condition, I would have it put down. So I got excited by the thought that Denise Rodecker could be my ticket out of this mess. All I had to do is get her the medical attention she so obviously needed. And then once she was healthy, she could tell the cops what had actually happened. Everything's going to be okay, Denise, I told her. I'm going to take you over to Lunatiks Hospital, and they're going to make you feel better. And then I gave her a reassuring smile. And then she said, I love you. And then I said, you know if Lenox Hill is on 3rd Avenue or Lexington? By the time we got to the emergency room at Lenox Hill, it's on Lexington, by the way, Denise Rodecker said she loved me 4 times. I didn't take it seriously, figuring that these were merely the incoherent murmurings of an obese, insulin-deleted nymphomaniac who just happened to be looking in my direction as I drove at my new preferred speed of 34 miles per hour so as not to call attention to the car. And I also didn't take it seriously when she insisted I hold her hand as the bald male nurse with the mole on the top of his head wheeled her into the treatment room. I obliged, figuring it was innocuous, a mere comforting gesture to a nervous patient, done all the time, like writing love at the end of a letter to someone you couldn't care less about. She your wife? Asked the bald male nurse with the mole on the top of his head. No. Girlfriend? She's just a neighbor, I told him. Interesting. Why do you say that? Because you two seem rather close for just being neighbors, he said. Why, because I'm holding her hand? No, because she's flashing her left breast at you with her other hand, he said. Excuse me? I asked, before looking down and seeing that Denise had opened her hospital gown and was now exposing what I could only presume was a breast, given its location on her massive chest, although any positive ID that a nipple would provide wasn't visible, as it was hanging over the other side of the gurney. Still, the bald male nurse with the mole on the top of his head saw my face redden with horror, which he unfortunately mistook for embarrassment. See what I'm saying? He asked with a sneer that was just begging to be mauled by a Doberman from the wine shop. She's hot for you. Oh, that's just the diabetes talking, I told him. Diabetes doesn't talk, he insisted, his sneer getting more sneerish. High fevers talk. Alzheimer's talks. Certain infectious diseases don't shut up for a second, but diabetes? No. Diabetes comes stag and pretty much sucks the air out of the party. Okay, then it's the insulin that's talking, I shot back. I'm telling you, she has no idea what she's saying. Insulin doesn't talk either, he countered. Serotonin talks, dopamine talks, Ultra said. A lot of your ADD and ADHD medications can be quite chatty, as can certain kinds of marijuana, cocaine, and other street drugs. But insulin? Hell no. As boring as diabetes is, it's a veritable one-man band compared to insulin. Well, something other than this woman is talking, I shouted. Can't you see she's sick? Just look at her. At her skin color, at that stuff that looks like strawberry Turkish taffy dripping out of the sides of her mouth. That is strawberry Turkish taffy, he answered. Her coat pockets were stuffed with wrappers when she came in. I'm telling you, she knows exactly what she's saying. Great, I thought to myself before taking another glance at Denise Rodecker, who, when she saw I was looking at her, furtively opened the front of her gown, revealing the entire festival that was going on underneath. Needless to say, I was mortified, and for the sake of not having nightmares for the rest of my life, turned my head, and when I did, I caught a glimpse of the television in a patient's room across the hall. I guess it stands to reason that it's newsworthy when a police helicopter lands on the Henry Hudson Parkway after its pilot is shot in his scrotum. So there it was, with the newscaster saying that the cops suspect that this was the handiwork of armed terrorists. And then they showed a picture of that idiot Peckerman. And then they showed a picture of me, and I knew right then and there that should I come up with a plan E or whatever the hell letter I was up to, because I, Philip Horkman, was now officially on the lam. Chapter 19. Chapter 12. Jeffrey. I couldn't believe the asshole Horkman actually wanted me to help him. A day earlier, I was a successful man with a comfortable lifestyle as one of the top 3 or 4 forensic plumbers in northeastern New Jersey. Now, thanks to this lunatic, I'm running from cops who are shooting at me with actual fucking bullets. Help him? I wouldn't piss on him if he was on fire. So, I left Horkman behind and kept running. I lost track of Buddy, but at that point, my feeling was that Buddy was on his own. It was dark, and I had no idea where I was, except somewhere in Manhattan. I heard a lot of shouting behind me, ducked into an alley, crossed to another street, and then into another alley. I stopped to catch my breath, sweating like a pig. I could hear shouting, sirens, more helicopters, but no more shooting, thank goodness. I kept moving, walking now, alley to alley. While I was walking, I was trying to come up with a plan. I decided step 1 was call Donna, tell her to get hold of a lawyer. I felt for my phone. Fuck. No phone. It was back in my car. So I thought, okay, find a payphone. But here's the thing. There are no payphones left in Manhattan, at least that I could find. I swear I walked 2 miles and I kept seeing places where there used to be payphones, but all there is now is the smell of piss. There are times when New York City seems like one giant urinal, and this was one of those times. I was trying to avoid people, but I decided I had to go into some business that might have a payphone. I was mid-block on a quiet street, and I saw this little sign that said the Camel's Nose next to some steps leading down to a door. I went in. Looked like a typical shithole bar with 3 guys, a bartender, and 2 customers, clumped together under a TV. They all turned and looked at me, not friendly. I would describe them, and I'm not being racist, I'm just describing, as swarthy. You got a payphone? I said. Nobody answered, but while they weren't answering, I noticed a payphone at the end of the bar. Found it, thanks, I said, walking past them. They were still staring at me. To be honest, I was wishing I picked another place to go into, but at that point I couldn't pussy out. So I went to the phone, and of course it wasn't a real payphone belonging to the phone company. It was some phone company I'd never heard of, operated by some raghead in Bangladesh who wanted my credit card number and probably charged me $80 to call Jersey. But what choice did I have? While the call was going through, I looked back toward the bar. The good news was the 3 swarthy stooges weren't still looking at me. The bad news was they were looking at the TV, which was showing my car. It was an aerial shot of the Henry Hudson Parkway, and there had to be 300 cops running around. I could see my smashed car, Horkman's Prius, and the police helicopter, which had some smoke coming out. The bottom of the screen said terrorist attack on GW Bridge. Jesus Christ. Hello, said Donna. It's me. Where the hell are you? I'm in... What the hell did you do? Listen, Donna, just calm down. Do not tell me to calm down. I think I mentioned this before, but never tell a woman to calm down. Donna, just listen, okay? No, you listen. Do you know what they're showing on the TV right now? My car? They're showing your car. I know that. Listen, what? Jeffrey, they're saying you're a terrorist. Donna, if you'll just shut up a minute. What, Taylor? Oh my gosh. They're saying you tried to bomb the George Washington Bridge. Donna, I didn't. Quiet. What, Taylor? Oh my gosh. No. What'd she say? Oh my gosh. What did she say? You shot a police officer. What? I don't even have a quiet. What, Taylor? Oh my gosh. What? You shot a police officer in the scrotum. Donna, I swear to you, I don't. Be quiet. Yes, Taylor, it's a body part on a man. I'll explain it later. What? Oh my God. Oh my God. What? They're showing your picture on TV. I looked at the TV over by the bar. It was showing my New Jersey driver's license photo. Next to it was a photo of the Horkman asshole. The screen said terror suspects. Now the 3 swarthy guys were looking at me. Donna, I said, listen, you need to... Somebody's here. The police are here. Donna, Jeffrey, they're at the door. I have to go. I'll call you right back. But I don't have my phone. Too late. She was gone. I started trying to get a hold of Bangladesh again so I could call back when a swarthy hand grabbed the phone from me and hung it up. I turned and saw the bartender with the other two guys right behind him. What the fuck? I said. The bartender pointed back in the general direction of the TV. You did this, he said, except he had some kind of swarthy accent, so did sounded like deed. Listen, I said, I didn't do anything. He arched an eyebrow. But that is you, he said, on television. Yes, that's me, but it's a misunderstanding. He arched his eyebrow again. He had huge eyebrows, like he was raising miniature porcupines on his forehead. Misunderstanding, he said. Yes, misunderstanding. I'm not a terrorist. I live in New Jersey. I was following a lady who lost her insulin pump, so she took this guy's lemur. His what? Lemur, it's like a monkey. There is no monkey on the television. It ran away. The point is, it was all a big mistake. I'm not a terrorist. The bartender nodded. Of course, he said, if you are terrorists, you will say you are not terrorist. Terrorists do not say, hello, I am terrorist. I know, but I'm telling you, I'm really not one. So if you'll just let me make a call here, I'm going to get this all straightened out. I reached for the phone, but he put his hand in the way. You are not using phone, he said. All right, I said, I'll find another phone. I tried to head for the door, but they blocked me. You can't keep me here, I said. We are not keeping you here, said the bartender. We are taking you somewhere. What the fuck are you talking about? The bartender said something foreign. The other two swarthies grabbed me. Hey, I said, you can't do this. But it turned out they could. Chapter 13, Philip. Did the cardiac patient whose television I was watching have that fatal heart attack because he saw my picture on the news and then looked over to see the same man being identified as an armed terrorist standing next to his bed sipping a Diet Fresca? Hard to say. But the moment I saw him grab his chest, followed by those gurgling sounds, followed by that flatline beep from the monitor on his night table, followed by a veritable stampede of doctors and nurses shouting, "Code Blue!" I thought it wise to slip out of the room and give those dedicated professionals all the space they needed to revive that now very dead man. Now in the hallway, my phone rang, but it drew no attention to me as it was, thank goodness, still on vibrate from when I said it just before the dance recital. Hard to believe this was still the same night. It started. The caller ID displayed my home number, and I wanted to answer it. It had been several hours since I'd bolted from that auditorium in pursuit of Denise Rodecker and the lemur, and my guess was that Daisy, in the very least, was worried, and at the very most, homicidal. Turns out she was neither. I'll call you right back from a landline, I whispered into the phone. Why? Because the cops and probably the FBI are looking for me, and they can trace my whereabouts from my cell phone. Okie dokie. I hung up and walked a few steps down the hall where I tried the knob on a door labeled Doctor's Lounge. It was unlocked. I entered and was relieved to see it was devoid of lounging doctors. So I picked up the wall phone, dialed 9 for an outside line, and called home. Too bad you missed the finale, she answered the phone, saying. All the kids got on stage in costume and danced to the Scott Joplin music from The Sting. Daisy, sort of a ragtime number. It was wonderful. Daisy, I'm in big trouble. What's wrong? She asked with only a slight hint of concern. Haven't you heard? Everyone thinks I tried to blow up the George Washington Bridge. No, I hadn't heard, she responded. That slight hint of concern was now nowhere to be found. That she didn't know what was going on was not totally surprising. Daisy is not what you call a news junkie. Don't get me wrong, she's not uninformed. She knows what's going on in the world and can hold her own in any conversation. But she's prone to seeking out current events on her own terms as an option when she's in the mood to be updated about what's happening in the world. as opposed to an addiction to the all news all the time credo of certain media sources. So it was very possible that after the recital, she drove home listening to a CD instead of the radio, then put the kids to bed, and then drifted off while watching an old movie on cable or a TiVoed episode of Oprah instead of CNN, MSNBC, or any other commercial station that featured me and that moron Peckerman in bulletins that were now interrupting regular programming. What was surprising, though, was how casually she was taking this whole thing as I was explaining it to her, as if she was merely humoring me when I told her about these absurd charges being levied against me. Okay, so the bullet hit him in the scrotum, and then what? Was it a particularly large scrotum, or is your aim really that good? Daisy, you've been drinking again, haven't you? Drinking? Again? I don't drink. Don't pretend you don't remember, she snapped. Remember what, Daisy? Then again, if you really don't remember, that proves you have been drinking, because that was an episode a sober person would never forget. I racked my brain. Oh my gosh, Daisy, you've got to be kidding. Do I sound like I'm kidding? Okay, here goes. Many years before, I was the best man at my brother's wedding. Outdoors, an incredibly hot August night. To cool off, I had 4 gin and tonics during the cocktail hour that preceded the ceremony. Funny how I didn't feel its effects walking down the aisle, or when I took my place of honor under the canopy, or even during the rabbi's sermon about the sanctity of matrimony when I peered outward and noticed a gorgeous teenage cousin from the bride's family sitting in the audience with her legs spread a little too far apart, wearing mesh underwear. So my best guess is that this was about the time the alcohol kicked in, because never, under sober circumstances, when I was supposed to hand the groom the wedding ring, would I have shouted at the top of my lungs, "Beaver, 3rd row, first seat!" My brother hasn't spoken to me since. That was also the last time I had a drink. Daisy, that was 19 years ago. And you sound just as idiotic right now as you did that night, so my suggestion to you, Philip, is to have a few cups of coffee and don't get back into the car until you're in control of yourself, because the last thing you need is for a cop to pull you over and have a DUI on your driving record. It will send our auto insurance rates soaring. And then she hung up. And then I heard voices in the hallway on the other side of the door. And though I couldn't tell if they came from doctors or nurses or even the police at this point, one thing was now certain. Thanks to the media, I was now recognizable and needed to become incognito. So I opened one of the lockers in the doctor's lounge and found a lab coat. It was full length and covered the clothes I was wearing when I put it on. It also had an ID badge pinned to its breast pocket that could possibly help me pass for a physician as long as I was in this hospital. That was the good news. The not so good news was that the badge had the name Jahangir Shahristani, MD, printed on it, with the picture of a man who looked a lot more like a Jahangir Shahristani than I do. So I scanned the lounge and saw a scalpel lying on a counter next to an apple that a surgeon apparently cored it with. I picked it up and carefully cut Jahangir Shahristani's headshot out of his ID, and then replaced it with the picture of me that I removed from my New Jersey driver's license, making it adhere with cellophane tape I found on an unattended reception desk outside the lounge. I picked up a clipboard, pretending they were my patient's charts, and started smiling and nodding to my colleagues as I passed them in the halls and worked my way to the nearest exit door.